You doing, Ben?
Heads up.
Oh, heads up. Oh.
I'm poking the ceiling with my head up.
Hmm. And if we were in Texas, you'd be holding your heads up.
You're right. You're smart. Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of the Two Fish at the Table Poker Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Legend Ben One on Poker Stars.
And I'm your other host, East Coast Sam. Welcome to our special Heads Up episode. We're going to be talking about several different types of Heads Up poker media, including high stakes duel, NBC's Heads Up Championship, and a very special movie that honors Heads Up play that I'm sure many of you have been looking for us to talk about. But first and foremost, we have to talk about probably the biggest development in the poker world since our last episode, the passing away of Doyle Brunson, one of, if not the biggest legend in the entire game of poker. It's just, I was thinking about this the other day and I was just saying to myself, if Doyle Brunson had just done Super System and nothing else, he would be considered a legend. If he had just won the main event twice, he'd be considered a legend. If he was just a guy who had won 10 bracelets, he'd be considered a legend. But he did all those things and then some and was a really impeccable ambassador for the game of poker. I mean, really, there really isn't another figure like Doyle.
Yeah, my first not interaction, but my first time ever learning of Doyle Brunson was watching the '04 main event where Scott Fishman squared off with him on day two. And it was it was just really great seeing a guy like him who I knew nothing about prior to watching the episode sort of just run the table, having a great time in the main event of all places. And I really endeared myself to his 50th place finish in that 51st or whatever it was in that main event. He was great to see, and the respect that the whole table had for him when he got up from the table after he busted. That was really something. And he it probably, if you ask the average, Joe to name any poker players, you probably they'd probably be able to tell you probably Phil Hellmuth or Doyle Brunson, probably, and that just speaks to how big of a name he was, the man who wrote the book on poker, the man who, wore the hat, Texas Dolly, the 10 deuce, everything about him, just what a legend. And the fact that he overcame cancer multiple times in his life, and was such a playing at such a high level in the poker scene into his 70s and 80s and making it to 89. It really was such a legend of the game.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And just, his table presence as well, that he was always very respectful to his opponents, but yet had a bit of a wit to him. I mean, his reaction to the hand between Jamie Gold and Sam Farha, where after it all happens, he just says, if I played poker like that, my dad would come out of the grave and slap the shit out of me. That was just hilarious. I mean, always just carried himself so well, was such a great ambassador for the game with his presence. Yeah, and just the fact that he just kept playing the game well into his 80s. Watching him play the main event, I think it was in 21. Just him being there was just so cool. And every time he'd win a hand, everybody would applaud. I mean, I don't know if there's another figure really like that in poker, who just commands such a presence and a universal respect from everybody. Even, I mean, Phil Hellmuth arguably has more accomplishments than Doyle Brunson, and somewhat of a controversial figure, I'll just say. So I mean, really is a passing of a legend and a changing of an era.
I know I did manage to snap a photo of Doyle playing in the main event during
Yeah.
my Las Vegas trip, almost 2 years ago, and I had a shocked look on my face, like, "Oh my God, it's Doyle Brunson!" And that photo, it's bittersweet looking back at that photo from my roster of photos from that trip. But I'm glad I managed to see the man once in action, live in person, before this turn of events here. And so, a brief moment of silence for the legend from us right now. All right. And so, moving on to our itinerary here. So we during this podcast, we're gonna make poker podcast history. We're gonna actually do a normal poker podcast, you and me, while we're playing Heads Up Poker on Poker Stars. So we're gonna have it up on the screen while we discuss our list of topics here. And so we'll see which one of us has learned the most from watching some of the top actors and top poker pros in Heads Up Poker. Which this theme of ours sort of began with High Stakes Duel 4, and we had that experimental live stream of our reactions to the Sean Deeb Mike Matusow squaring off, and that segued into the Pearson Negreanu showdown, which, honestly, having watched that whole thing, I was pretty let down by it.
Yeah, I mean, this was several days ago now, and it's really hard for me to remember specific hands.
Yeah.
I mean, Person's not talentless, but he is, more or less an amateur, and Negreanu is Daniel Negreanu. So I mean, this was very much, one-sided. I mean, Person pulled off a couple bluffs, but nothing super flashy. Negreanu, I think, did get better hands overall. They seemed nice with each other. They were exchanging pleasantries throughout. There was, enough table talk there, but nothing super hilarious or spectacular or anything. And yeah, I mean, I was interested because I thought I had heard before the match started that round two was already agreed upon, was already a set deal. So I was curious after, spoiler alert, Pearson lost, whether or not he would change his game at all, whether he would talk to coaches, talk to people who played with Negreanu. But unfortunately, he opted out against the second round. So unfortunately, we're really just left with this. And yeah, I don't have a high impression of his play. So
Yeah, Pearson, if you watch him on some of those like cash game live streams, for the most part, he's not rude unless there is some reason or an catalyst to sort of some more aggressive table talk. I mean, maybe when he bluffs, he'll play the speech play mind games a little bit, but in this format, especially with a shot clock, it's kind of hard to really get into too much of a speech play sort of routine there. And Negreanu, in those early levels, there's a bit, the leader switches hands a few times, and then Negreanu just kind of slowly grinded him down a bit. He would rebound a little bit, like 2/3 in, and then kind of just blinded his way down a little bit. And obviously, when it comes down to heads-up poker, the cards are probably the biggest factor. If one player pretty regularly gets the better end of the card distribution, and then from there things can go from if you're able to get lucky with a few well-timed bluffs. Right now we're going to get into sharing this poker screen here for our stuff right here. All right. And so now, continuing here. So, so Pearson, I wouldn't say he played bad. It's just that, Negreanu's a better player, and it showed in the results ultimately. It was.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, I would be curious to see if he was playing up against, one of these other guys who are these sort of big millionaires in these live stream cash games. I'd be curious to see if he can compete against these other people heads up. But yeah, I mean, this format I just don't really think works for him. Yeah, I mean, again, no real hands that can really break down. Again, Pearson pulls off one bluff where he manages to get Negreanu to fold a boat. That was really about it in terms of a flashy game. Yeah, again, they seemed amicable enough. There was no, how do I want to put this, theatrics like there was with the Hellmuth match. Pearson clearly can turn that on and turn that off depending on it. But yeah, again, nothing super special. I mean, the only really funny thing that happened was just what Daniel was wearing, that he changed. Wearing this like sort of like muscle suit, like he was trying to look like a bodybuilder. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and so I'm almost kind of glad they weren't going to go down the path of a rematch and then round three and all that stuff, because really, if it doesn't start off well, you can't really expect it to progress into anything substantial. And I don't know, maybe because I'm a diehard Hellmuth fan, so maybe I just kind of missed seeing Hellmuth versus the World that Bisexual 1 through 3 had. But it is what it is. I'm sure Poker Go will experiment with maybe another cast of characters in a Bisexual 5. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe this one will kill the show off for good.
Yeah. And also, just to clarify about the poker here, I'm not looking at the screen. So I'm not looking at rather Ben's screen that he's sharing with y'all at home. So that way there's no bias here. I should also say, for the record, I have been running terribly lately. I have been doing so bad. There was a tournament I was playing earlier where two guys went all in who had me covered. I had pocket kings. I called all in. That one guy had pocket aces. The other guy had ace jack. The flop was king high. The turn pairs the board. The river was the case ace. So I would have tripled up if I had gotten this through. Wow. But it didn't get through. So I've been running terribly. So I'm just going to preempt with that.
And as far as me, I actually played more of that GameCube World Series of Poker. I managed to play in the main event, got third place. and was one river card away from being heads up for the whole thing. So that could have been pretty awesome. But anyway, so let's get into really what classifies as heads up poker media, because there's
Right.
really three categories. There's a tournament that has weeded its way down to the final two. There is 1v1 cash game kind of squaring offs, and then there's tournaments that are specifically dedicated to heads up. In this case, the NBC Heads Up Championship, or something like the final showdown of rounders, or things like that. So heads up poker, especially short-handed table play is one of those things that people often comment as they don't have a lot of experience in. But
Right.
I feel like nowadays it's much more common you'll have some heads up specialists.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, heads up poker is, when I've played it, it's very exhilarating because obviously you're playing any two cards, and there's a lot of, hands that you're playing that you wouldn't normally play. I'm a very tight player, as I've spoken about before. So, for example, I'll be playing, crazy hands every now and again. Like the hand I'm playing right now is pretty crazy. This is a tough call here. All right, just to show what I'm playing with. I was playing with 6-5.
Flop the nuts, sorry.
Yeah, Ben flopped the nuts. I flopped two pair, and then
Could have folded. Paired board, three spades. Anyway. So,
anyway, yeah. I mean, I like heads up because again, I'm playing a lot more hands than I would normally. Yeah, and then often because my tournament strategy is to make the fewest amount of mistakes possible, try to make us take as few risks as I can. I often don't get to heads up at the end of tournaments. In the Mind Sport Olympiad, I've only been heads up once, and that was with Kaz, which we won't go into. But
it's been covered.
Yeah, it's been covered. Yeah, I mean, I definitely do like playing heads up, but I'm not as experienced as I think I could be.
Mm-hmm. Now, with poker, it's a very social game, and one of the problems is when you have heads up, it's only two people. You only get so much, social action there.
Right.
With a full table, you could have two players squaring off, but the other table kind of is present and can chime in and stuff. So it makes for a different dynamic as a viewer because I love seeing a table of nine, seeing bizarre characters, top pros, people squaring off, and so with two players, it really does kind of change what to expect when you're watching something like that.
Yeah, I mean, getting sort of more into the NBC thing, I mean, they do a really great job at making this feel exhilarating and exciting. They have a whole set with like gladiators and people dressed up as gladiators and these Roman pillars and stuff. And obviously, we're watching the very last year that this was done, which was 2013. So by this point, this tournament had developed a reputation as a prestigious tournament. But everybody seems excited to be there. Everybody, a lot of these people have experience with heads up, but you also have a pretty good mixture of players. You have some old timers. You have sort of rising stars in the game. You have people who haven't had a history of not doing so well in the tournament, who have otherwise been successful otherwise in poker. So I think they did a pretty good job at NBC of really mixing it up and having a bunch of different players, some of whom are very talkative, some of whom are a little bit quieter, but a good variety of people that you can watch as the tournament progresses.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, there was kind of a reputation, a history, a continuity to this program because it began in 05, and besides 2012, it had been an annual event, and obviously historians know that the most likely the reason why was from Black Friday and and all of that stuff that we've covered in other podcasts. So naturally, you see that they took a year off and they managed to come back, and it almost kind of felt like they really expected to have future iterations of this tournament, and I guess maybe financially it just wasn't salvageable because without the online poker site advertising angle, they had to pay to put this on TV. It was not something that the NBC pays them to put to hold. So it makes for difficult arrangements for future iterations when you don't have that reliable income coming in.
Yeah, and this is also, I mean, 2013, the poker boom had lapsed by that point. I mean, definitely the game of poker was still popular, but the game had changed. Some of the more dark elements of the game had seeped their way in there. Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, I'd be curious to see if they could bring something like this back. If Poker Go is maybe looking for something like this, I'd be curious to with a new cast of players, some new players that weren't around in 2013. Obviously, some of the older players wouldn't really be around anymore, but I definitely would like to see this format come back.
Yeah, and, you know, there are heads up. There's the WSOP Poker has the heads up championship event, which we discussed actually from 2011 in
Right.
the past podcast. So it's not like heads up events don't exist. It's just that a you know, on NBC of all channels, you know, there was a different method to getting this types of programs made to be on TV back then, given the ad revenue that was supposedly with all these websites. So it's a different situation, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as going over the structure of this event, the head of championship, for the most part, I thought was a pretty consistent structure. So they had 64 players who paid $25,000 to enter,
Hmm.
playing at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. And you know, every round you'd play an opponent, move on to the next round, and they had brackets. So the each suit, so the clubs, hearts, spades, diamonds bracket. So that was kind of cool. And then you have Julie Donaldson as sort of the host, who doesn't do a ton. She does do a few interviews after maybe the main table is all set, but otherwise, the main hosts here are Ali Najad and Matt Vasgersian.
Hmm.
And there'd be one kind of main featured table, and then maybe kind of one main featured outer table, and then the other tables kind of in the background in like a circle pattern in the room during that round.
Yeah, and if the featured table broke early, then they would move a new table to be at the featured table, which I like because it keeps keeps the people moving. It lets you get a sense of other people and how they're doing in the tournament.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the commentary is okay. Julie Donaldson's, she's just sort of there to say like, Phil, how do you feel? And Mike, how are you feeling? And then yeah, nothing too splashy in terms of I mean, Ali Najad I think was fairly new to commentary by this point. I think he still needed a little bit of time to step into his persona and be a little bit more outgoing. And then obviously I think he's a lot better with Nick Schulman and other people than
Mhm.
this other guy. But yeah, commentary is totally fine.
So I would argue, you know, we considered kind of the worst commentary besides none at all being the first iteration of the Super High Roller Bowl with Kara Scott and Misha Sylvia. I
Yeah,
definitely feel like these guys were one level better on the analysis and one level better on the flow of speech,
yeah.
like one grade better. But that still, for me, ranks relatively, you know, mediocre on the grand scheme of things, considering that the majority of what Matt says is, "Oh, he takes the pot." Like
Yeah.
that line itself, he says after almost every single hand is concluded with one folds, and it's just kind of repetitive. Just
Yeah, I
don't.
mean, one problem with this sort of format and also the way it's presented is that a lot of hands unfold very quickly. The players are all pretty experienced. They know that they need to make decisions quickly, but it doesn't really let time to have commentary or tension settle in. So it's just very much like, all right, he bets, he takes the pot. He bets, he takes the pot, instead of really letting the moment flesh out and letting you feel tension as a viewer. So again, I mean, that's not a huge problem. It also just means that again we can see other tables. It keeps the tournament moving. It doesn't feel like things are slowing down, but it also just didn't have enough time to really let the commentary flesh out and get a sense of these people's personalities.
I totally agree. And you know, this is a pretty fast structure. I think it's like 15-minute levels or so. And as a result of that, the the pace of the blinds can get pretty fast. You know, the number of big blinds that the starting stack in the round has wasn't exactly the same on each round. Sometimes it'd
Mhm.
be like 80, it'd be 100 sometimes. You know, in a variety. But then the blinds get very fast, get up to very fast, and it just kind of becomes more of a shove fest for a lot of the matches by the end. And so, you know, that's not exactly ideal heads up poker on display when you get to that point.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I am mentioning that we do get to see some other tables while the action is going on, but for the most part, a lot of tables off to the side, we just get when a bust out happens or when a double up happens. I would have liked to have seen, you have all these cameras set up, would like to have seen a little bit more of what those outer tables actions were like, especially
Yeah.
because you have a lot of people. I mean, at the feature table, they're putting up Phil Ivey and Phil Locke, for instance, in the first episode, which obviously, I mean, those are two big personalities. You need to have them front and center. But you have like a lot of other people, like, Victor Blum and all sorts of other people who you could, definitely have a little bit more screen time in your episode. Maybe have an hour and a half long episode instead of just 40 minutes.
And also, Phil Hellmuth gets put at the main table in each round. And while I love Hellmuth, I almost felt everyone else kind of got the short end of the stick for that from that treatment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably, you know, little things I really liked is some of the graphics and section and just design of this program. There's
Mhm.
often some great shots of each player in kind of a grid, and that narrows down to like each of those rounds. Or
Oh, yeah.
whenever a player busts out, we get to see what their career record in the heads up championship was, and then it updates to that match's record. So that's kind of cool because you have a lot of first timers in this event, and also some people that have been there every year. And the commentary talks about, oh, he had a first round exit last year, or he's never made it past this round ever before. So again, the continuity is very good. If you having just only seen this one, I didn't feel like I was completely in the dark as far as a player's history in this event.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing that we haven't mentioned is that they would do these sort of like little interview segments with some players, usually about like one an episode or so, but they're often very short. They're usually like 30 seconds long.
Mhm.
And again, there's no real sense of really like letting this play out and learning more about the player. It's more just like, I'm going to win this match. You know, this guy's a good player, but I'm going to beat him. And then that's it. And then there'd also be these like other little segments, like, for example, in the first episode, you know, who would you play at this tournament? There is a sort of Doyle Brunson tribute segment later on when he sort of pops up, which again are just too short to really let things settle in and really get to learn about these players. I don't really know why they're in here. They could have been cut out and we could have seen, you know, a moment from an outer table that we could have missed.
Yeah, no, totally fair. And oddly enough, every episode also ends with kind of an interview segment bit, like after the episode's kind of over. So for the first couple of episodes, I kind of missed out on like watching them because I was like, wait a minute, oh, there's more. It was kind of an odd choice to put those in there when they could have totally flowed into the episode. You stick them in during one of the natural breaks for one of those interview bits. But it was interesting, and every now and then they'll also show tweets from various players in the event talking about, oh, I'm playing this player next, or I just lost this crazy hand, or oh my god. So I kind of like that too. It was they're relatively quick, and it kind of breaks up the action here and there. But there definitely is kind of a formula to these episodes because after the first sort of like commercial break, it'll cut to Matt and Ali, and Ali will kind of give his prediction for who will win the match, and he's kind of like 50-50 as far as how accurate he is. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Heads up poker can be, there's a lot of variance obviously there, so it's not so simple. But I'm just surprised that they stuck to such a simple formula each time.
Yeah, it is an odd formula. Yeah, and again, like Ollie's, you know, like Ollie still had needed time to really grow into his persona and his personality as a commentator. And it's often just like, you know, oh, this guy's pretty good, but this guy's also pretty good, so I'm going to vote for him. You know, there's no real time to really let his opinions settle in and let him exposit about things.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah, and so again, this might be sounding kind of negative on hearing her things, but
Yeah.
I did like a lot of the choices by this program, and it looks good. It's even when the action's not the most exciting, it still flows pretty good. It's
Mhm.
just that I think that the little things that could have been better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do again, we have a lot of really great you know, poker on display from a bunch of different people. I mean, spoiler alert, Mike Matusow winds up winning this, and he really manages to, you know, a guy who's not known for his heads up play, who at this point was kind of in 2013 seen as kind of a has been, somebody who the game has passed by. He really manages to maneuver his stack and stay in the moment up against a lot of really good players. And you know, again, we also have, you know, anybody who was anybody in the game in 2013 was here. So we have, you know, Phil Ivey in this first episode, you know, going up against Phil Locke, who's not as good of a player, but again, you know, pretty solid, straightforward poker on display from Phil Ivey. So I mean, it's, you know, definitely was entertaining throughout, and there's some things you could learn about poker here and there. You know, just we're just talking about certain things that didn't quite work for us.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, you mentioned, when I think of like heads up poker battles, there are various main event heads up battles that I thought were just fantastic that really stood out to me. And with the brunt of these matches, I didn't feel that there was a super strong narrative for a good number of them. A couple of them definitely get up there, and the banter of the players definitely escalates and stuff. But I would say maybe out of the, it's hard to count how many were given enough focus, but maybe only like 3 or 4 that I really got fully invested in, as far as like a classic heads up squaring off 2 pros going at a battle that was like stuck in my memory banks. Really, maybe 3 or 4 of them did that for me.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of true investment with both players, yeah, I would agree with you. But I mean, again, what we see, there are some moments just, you know, here and there in each episode that I like. Like, for example, Sam Simon, of all people, beating David Oppenheim in the first episode. Like, I was really surprised to see that. I was like, oh, wow, he actually pulled that off. That's kind of cool.
Mhm.
You know, just little moments like that that did hang my interest.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
So again, the first episode. This is a 12 episode production, and so the first episode is the spades bracket, and so that gives us 16 players and 8 tables to cover it. So the main table is again the two Phils, Phil Locke and Phil Ivey, and then Mike Matusow plays Grinder, one of his closest friends. So that was kind of a Grinder just and his friends. He has this very like polarizing thing where his friends will do either really well or really awful whenever he's involved with them in a big event. It's kind of funny, like guys like Newhouse and Vellador and stuff that we've talked about. And so with this first episode, my initial impression, because I had never really seen this program before. I'd seen like the Tom Dwan, Phil Hellmuth hand, and
Right.
little things there, but I had no. So I thought that it was well produced, but the pace of the action was too fast for anything to really sink in, especially in these episodes that have 8 tables.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a bunch of different people in this. We have, John Hennigan. We have, I mentioned Oppenheim. We had Chewy. We had Victor Blum. We have just a lot of people here that, again, I would like to see more of with a bunch of different combinations of people, too. I mean, Chewy's going up against Victor Blum. That would be really curious to see. I mean, they were both very big online players at this point.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, most of the hands are just kind of bang bang, nothing too flashy or special. We just don't have enough time at the outer tables to really let things sink in. It's just again nothing. I was never bored by it. There were a couple little moments of speech, mainly with Mike and the Grinder, just sort of talking to each other and having this interesting banter that I kind of liked. But nothing that like really caught my eye. And I'm like, oh my god, I got to go watch this. I'm gonna watch this again after this episode's done. Just fairly straightforward stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I kind of put in my notes here, not boring, but not memorable.
Yeah.
Like my attention was there. I was excited to see this new kind of production of a heads up championship that I hadn't seen before, but it just wasn't anything that was upper tier. But I also knew that these things tend to get better over time when players have multiple matches under the belt and things kind of escalate naturally. And so I was definitely excited when episode 2 began and we had Phil Hellmuth versus Mike Sexton, the late Mike Sexton. And so that was fun to watch because this episode actually had some river magic and some bad beats, and so it was actually pretty exciting as far as heads up poker stands can really get, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, they have a good rapport with each other. Sexton isn't known as, a guy that you can really run over. I mean, he beat Negreanu heads up for the bracelet. And, Helmuth also just, stays fairly mannered. There's not too many antics. So you really get to, again, get a sense of him as a poker player, which is often lost, I think, in a lot of media that features him.
Mhm. And so with Helmuth, he does this weird thing where where he shook everyone's hand
Oh,
around
yeah.
all around the table, and I thought that was very odd because we've seen him do that like at one nine-handed table, but not like going around the whole room and shaking everyone's hand. That's kind of funny, little pretentious, I think, but it's an amusing start to things.
Yeah, Hellmuth's persona is just so interesting because I sometimes feel like he's playing things up a little bit. And I think that's one of those moments where he knows that he's playing up to the cameras a little bit. He's loving the attention a little bit. But yeah, again, for the most part, he does manage to rein it in and play against Sexton in a couple different ways.
Yeah, no, Hellmuth kind of runs over Mike Sexton, even though Sexton makes some pretty good reason, loses the minimum a few times there.
Yeah.
And Hellmuth takes him down, and there was an odd graphic error during the coverage of the Somerville Moneymaker hand, where they showed the pot as 5,570
Hmm.
when there's no $5 denomination chip. 25 was the lowest denomination. So I was very confused how that again made it past in a 2013 television production, that glaring of an error on screen. That was again, we haven't seen those too often since those early main events, but that jumped out at me as a big error.
Yeah, it is an odd error.
And then because the Hellmuth match ends relatively early,
Hmm.
they have time to put in a new main table during the back half of the episode. So Maria Ho and Phil Galfond enter into that slot, and that would happen only when the main table ended pretty early in that round's action. It wasn't always the case. Obviously that table could be the last one to finish up. I didn't really. I mean, Maria Ho had 3 bad beats, kind of sink her ship, and and so she goes out in the first round, which is unfortunate because I know she's a very talented player, and it's hard when that first round just goes so horrible for you right up in back-to-back hands.
Yeah, I mean that just happens sometimes in heads up. I mean, but still, ace queen versus 9-8, aces versus queen jack, ace five versus king jack. I mean, that's just it's just rough.
Yeah, and so I did like episode 2 considerably more than episode 1. So that was a bit of a course correction for this program early in its run, and,
Mhm.
and so again I had some decent expectations for episode 3, the clubs bracket with one of my another favorites, Sfandiari against Jennifer Tilly at the main table.
Yeah, I mean this when the episode started and I saw this lineup, I'm like, oh boy, because obviously Esfandiari versus Phil Locke would have been a little bit better, but Esfandiari Tilly is a good second choice. And yeah, I mean Tilly is not somebody, say what you will about her her skills as a poker player. At the table, her presence and her demeanor, she's not somebody who backs down, and she gives as much as she takes and vice versa. And I really like that. This was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I thought this was the best episode of the 3 right off the bat here. The table talk was fantastic, and the kind of the third party of Phil Locke watching made for some amusing sort of side commentary there, and so that was great. And then on the other hand, the other tables they don't really get that much time because there's so much more focus on the main table, which I didn't mind. But I appreciate that the editors didn't feel the need to detract from the main table's action because they allowed this main table to really take the spotlight.
Yeah, but I mean, on the other hand, we've got Vanessa Russo versus Timoshenko. We've got Chris Moorman versus Carlos Mortensen. We have a lot of players here that I would have liked to have seen something from beside, oh, he doubled up or he busted out or something else. Again, props to the editors. Yeah, I mean, they did notice that this was going to be the main source of attention, but yeah, I would have liked to have just seen a little bit more from these outer tables.
Yeah, and again, that's one of the problems when you have these round of 64 episodes. When
Mhm.
you have 8 tables happening. Usually 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6 tables get really one hand each sometimes, and so
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to really appreciate the full size of the field. But at the same time, if this was going to give me quality Esfandiari entertainment, then I was going to let it slide for at least one episode here.
Yeah, like, there are a lot of great lines. Jennifer Tilly makes a bet of $100 if she wins the match. She after she doubles up on the river, she starts like jumping around saying, "Because I live right, baby, that's why I win." Just things like that. There's just so many great lines. This
Mhm.
is definitely the if Poker Ghost sometimes will like clip a couple hands from high stakes duel or something and put it on YouTube. This is definitely the heads up match that if NBC were clipping hands and putting them up on YouTube, this would be the match that they would clip the most hands from. It's just really fun.
I completely agree. And so again, it was things. We're definitely improving in a pretty good linear fashion, episode to episode, which brought us to the final episode of the round of 64 to the Diamonds bracket, where we actually have 2 ladies, Liv Marie and Gail Bowman, fresh off for bubbling the final table in 2012 in the main event. At the main table, and Bowman, it was kind of she was wearing like a tie. It was kind of like an Avril Lavigne look. It was very strange, but good for her for making some fashion choices there. And then the outer tables, you actually had Greg Merson there too. It was kind of fun. It was kind of a
Yeah.
20 main event themed episode, and of course Doyle Brunson, Texas Dolly, the late Doyle Brunson that we discussed a few minutes ago, in action. And it was definitely bittersweet watching him at that outer table there in this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned earlier they gave almost like a little tribute montage. He's still alive, of course, while this is being aired, but it's essentially just a montage of everybody in the tournament going, Doyle Brunson's a legend. He's so great. He inspired me to play the game, etc. So that was really. I think I watched this episode the day after Doyle passed away or something.
It was pretty close, yeah.
It was pretty close. So like watching that was like, oh, Doyle.
Yeah, and he does take down Tom Marchese of all people, so
Yeah.
that was pretty cool. But with this episode here, it kind of I was rooting for Gail Bowen during that match. It was kind of funny. I just felt like Marie's style and her demeanor at the table. Gail just felt more sympathetic for some reason. I don't know, and it did kind of feel like that Marie didn't really have much respect for Gail's game just from how she played. That's just kind of my interpretation as a outside observer of this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, looking over my hands here, yeah, I mean, I think They had mentioned in the coverage that Bowery was more experienced than Bowman was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, still stayed respectful. There's
Right,
kind of
right.
an interesting little table talk between them where Liv Bowery asked, like, "Have you been recognized from the main event?" Dale Bowman's like, "Oh yeah, kind of sometimes." I thought that was kind of interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, I was definitely curious. I didn't know who won this heads up, like who would prevail.
Same.
So yeah, Bowman, spoiler alert, does prevail. And yeah, I mean, maybe Liv Bowery was playing a little too aggressive in certain places. I don't know. I mean, it's a tough call to make.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's an interesting observation now that I'm kind of thinking about it. Like, yeah, was Liv Bowery super? What exactly was she thinking of Gail Bowman as they were playing heads up? That's an interesting thought.
It's something that occurred to me because
Yeah.
I found my like almost my subconscious bias was rooting for Gale. So that was just my thought process there. On the outer tables, it was kind of funny. Doyle Brunson in his victory against Marchese, he just kept kind of having this habit of making superior straights to
Yeah.
Marchese straights. So it was just really funny. And then when Doyle flops a flush, Marchese bluffs into it. So again, it was not Marchese's day at all. Obviously, he's a great player that has a very impressive roster of accomplishments. But it was Doyle's day in this episode, and so that was kind of fun to watch too.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tar Marchese had released a tweet, not exactly disparaging the older players, but not quite complimenting them either. So they asked him at the end, like, what do you thought of Doyle? And he was very respectful toward Doyle, but it was kind of nice to see Doyle pull this off.
Absolutely. And one of the interview question bits was retire tomorrow, whereas Doyle says he never plans on retiring. And, 10 years later, that was very true. He did not retire from poker. He was still a player till the end. And Doyle also gets, people talking about him in another bit and then a post match interview with Julie. So again, it kind of felt like it was a Doyle Brunson episode, even though it kind of wasn't because he wasn't at the main table. So that was
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so again, I had a pretty strong emotional investment in this episode because rooting for Gail and watching Doyle. So that made for not quite maybe not the best episode of the four, but definitely one that I enjoyed all the same. Which got us finally into the round of 32 with episode 5, where they combined the clubs and spades brackets, where they doubled the starting stack. The blinds are a little bit different. They're 300, 600 instead of like 150, 300, whatever it was. So they doubled the blinds. And now we've seen most of these players in some capacity in round 1 and round 2. So that's, supposed to kind of play into how you expect they'll do in the later rounds. But in this case, we get Esfandiari against Duhamel at the main table.
Yeah, and they'd had a history with each other because they played the NBC Heads Up tournament previously, and I wasn't aware of that. So, like going into this, I'm like, all right, Esfandiari, Duhamel, like both of these guys, but that having that history be there and both of them talk about it too in their interviews definitely made the match a little bit more interesting than it would have otherwise.
Mm-hmm. It was unfortunate that I kind of found this one a bit dull, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I thought that I should have enjoyed the main table more than I actually did.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't quite, feel it's matched up to the other episodes main tables did. And a lot of the outer table hands, I feel like, the bust out hands, they look pretty awesome, but
Yeah.
we didn't actually see any of them, any of the action of those tables up until like the very end of the run of the board when they were all in. So
Mm-hmm.
we didn't really get to see too much of that. I mean, we saw Ivy and Bonomo square off, which is kind of two pokers, heavyweights going off, but they had a lot of big confrontations, so I guess that was okay. But I don't know. I just one of my lesser favorites of the season up to this point was episode 5.
No, I didn't. I didn't mind the Esfandiari Duhamel heads up. I mean, it wasn't as interesting as Bowman Bowery, but I still thought there was some interesting play, some interesting back and forth between the two. Esfandiari is just always jousting, always looking for little needles here and there. So it's just always interesting. Him just turning to the dealer and complaining about Duhamel raising him. Yeah, it's just funny.
Mm-hmm. And this was the first time that the featured table was the last one to finish in that
Right.
round, so there wasn't any effort to put in some other table for like one hand of all things when they wrapping up the round. I don't know. I mean, again, it just wasn't my favorite, but
Yeah.
I have pretty positive on the first 4 overall, so I didn't feel too bad about that. Which got us to episode 6, the Hearts and Diamonds bracket, where we have Justin Smith, kind of an odd choice, against Phil Hellmuth in the main table, and then some pretty solid. I mean, we have Tom Dwan against Doyle Brunson of all people, and
Yeah.
the RTO. That was pretty cool. And this episode for me actually had some of the best poker play I think on display out of all the action so far. But I
Mhm.
was let down that there were some table matches in the outer roster of tables that we saw nothing of. I was really I felt a little cheated of that.
Yeah, Bowman versus Dan Smith. Joseph Chung was out there. Alezra was out there. There were a lot of other players, yeah, that I would have definitely liked to have seen a little bit more of, again, that we just didn't quite get.
Mm-hmm. And then, so there were actually some pretty killer runouts for Phil Hellmuth early on. It was a Queen 10 against Queen 6 hand, which pretty much guaranteed maximum pain for Justin Smith in an early hand. Which in this heads up format, you have enough chips just barely to survive
Mhm.
a mega cooler like that in the first level or two. But really, if a terrible cooler happens at like level 3 of a match onward, it's pretty much game over at that point.
Yeah.
Unless you have more chips, of course.
Hmm. Yeah, again, it's just the format's just a little too fast. It's the stacks are just a little too short for hands like that to happen.
That's true. And then there was actually a pretty epic hero call by Doyle Brunson with bottom pair against Tom Dwan that you have to wonder if Phil Ivey had pulled off in that amazing like weird hand he had with like I don't know, like ace four, whatever the heck it was, ace six, whatever it was in that poker, high six poker, or whatever it was, cash poker from dark. You have to wonder if other players could pick up on that sort of skill up on Doyle there. And then there was also a bluff raise by Doyle with bottom pair on the river to win another hand. So he was really playing at a high level. Unfortunately, he plays one card poker with an ace again, like in the '09 main event Europe, and it doesn't work out for him when he has ace eight against ace nine against Tom Dwan, and he unfortunately loses the match, but he puts up a good show of it considering he only went out meant to.
Yeah, it's a shame of course, having watched this just after he passed away, you're just kind of like, come on, pull off an ace 10 instead of an ace 8, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah, and then briefly, Moneymaker plays Doc Sands in the updated table one after Hellmuth pulls off the win against Justin Smith, and so Doc Sands has an interview where he talks about the importance of Moneymaker winning in '03, which is nice. And Doc Sands is kind of out of the poker spotlight by this point, but I was a fan of him during kind of the early 2010s era. We had that PCA high roller run, for example. So I think he's a good player, and obviously his deep run in the main event of his girlfriend at the time, Erica Motina, was pretty legendary too.
Yeah, he comes off like a really nice guy. I mean, we'll have an episode coming up very shortly to see a lot more of him. But yeah, like he comes off very good poker player, very nice guy, and I hope he's doing well.
And I don't know if you caught on this, but there was one moment that I thought was extremely touching, and I really appreciate it. It was Tom Dwan offering to get Doyle's crutches for him after his match, and that was really nice of him.
Yeah, right after Doyle busts, Dwan with that just gets right up and hands him his crutches, which that was a really nice moment. Yeah.
So Tom Dwan, I feel like he's a pretty composed guy. We don't really see too much as far as emotion or who he is as a person too often, and that was a little thing that I really appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, even in the hand with Hellmuth where he spikes the 10, he smiles, but there's no like huge display of emotion. So yeah, that is a good observation.
Yeah. And so by the round of 16, players are actually in the money. I don't believe they tell
Right.
us how much money they're guaranteed, but I assume probably like 40,000, 50,000, maybe. I don't
I
know.
think something like that. Yeah.
And so I obviously no one's playing for the money because in heads up, it's like either you win or you lose. So it doesn't matter.
Right.
But so by episode 7, we make it to this point, and with that, we have 16 left. We have Esfandiari against the Jungle Man.
Mm-hmm.
And, now we only actually get 4 matches per episode, so we're still only covering half of the tournament bracket when we get down to. So they don't just do like one half of each one of the whole thing. So I was a little surprised by that. I guess it does allow you to show more of each match,
Mm-hmm.
but I did feel the pacing was considerably slower in the edit, and so I'm not sure if it was in the grand scheme of things the best thing in the world to choose that.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking for so much about how that it needs to slow down and needs to be more pacing. So I mean, yeah, I mean, there was also like a lot of other footage that just wasn't super necessary in this. Like there's this weird advertisement about 2/3 in the episode for Caesar's Palace's buffet for some reason that just it took like, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds. But again, it's like 30 seconds, that's enough time to show a hand. That's enough time to just have an interview that's a little bit longer and really let the player exposit about a topic that they're interested in. So it's like, why do you have this in here?
I know, because it reminded me of those ads during like Poker Superstars or the Hot Smart Board Bowl, where it was for the location, which I understand you know they want to spotlight, but it's a pretty room. I mean, it's not like you're not showing like some dark poker table in some back room in the Caesar Palace. You're showing it off by just having the event in there in the first place. And there's always the intro of the place and on the outside and all that stuff. So I don't know, just kind of shilling out for an ad in the middle of a program which is already 1/3 ads airing on NBC in the first place. So it's like kind of like, come on, really?
Yeah, it's a very odd gesture, and unfortunately, there are other advertisements that they sprinkle throughout. Not in every single episode, to be fair, but still, just very odd to have this in the seventh episode of your series too. Just doesn't make sense.
Well, speaking to your point about an ad each episode, this program aired in 2-hour blocks on a weekly basis. So they would air
Okay.
episodes at a time. So over, I guess, 6 weeks if you do the math there. But the thing about that is that I wonder if people really would stay tuned to watch both episodes, or would they really check out? Or I don't know what time slot this aired at on NBC, but it seemed like the ads of like turn to next week, that it wasn't the same time slot every single week. There was stuff in the afternoon, and it was at night sometimes. I don't know. I wonder if they were playing around with the time slot, because it's NBC and they're prone to do that to shows all the time.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't know about the 2-hour blocks thing. That does change things in terms of how it's presented and how it's edited. But yeah, I mean, it's just again, it's just odd.
Yeah.
I think it's just odd.
I know, I went for there. And so we only actually saw one hand from 2 of the matches in this episode. That was a real letdown because, I mean, you have 4 matches, so you can at least give us 3 hands from each one. I felt like that's the right balance there. The main match, though, I did feel there was a true narrative to like one player's in the lead and they fall down and they come back up and stuff. So that was pretty solid. But the actual table talk I wasn't super in love with, but it's Fondiari and Gentleman, so I guess I'll take what I can get to.
Yeah, I think my favorite line is, I think, in between hands when Jungle's talking to Esfandiari about magic, and Esfandiari says, "I don't do much magic. I practiced it all night just for you, Jungle." After he does like a little trick, I thought that was kind of neat. But yeah, nothing super flash like there was with Jennifer Tiller.
Yeah, and Kate's actually mucks the winning hand at one point,
Yeah,
but then wins an even bigger pot right afterwards, so it kind of made up for it. But it's always funny because we saw Ivy do that in 09 in the main event on like day 8 and stuff. So you have to wonder, I guess, how tired these guys must be or locked into the wrong things if they're going to make such simple mistakes like that.
yeah, absolutely.
And so with the outer table action here, we kind of had this weird like psychological like wink flirting routine by Scott Siever with Vanessa Rose said that was kind of awkward. Some of the comments on YouTube actually were like, "Wow, she totally got played by him," and ended up winning for Siever. He ends up winning the match, whereas on the other hand, Matusow, even though he's winning each match he plays in, we don't really see a ton of Matusow in these early rounds until towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, about Seaver, I mean, later on we see him play against Mike, and yeah, there's definitely a like passive aggressive tendency in how he talks and how he behaves. It's just nothing too offensive or anything, but definitely just like it just feels a little sleazy, just the way he's talking to Vanessa and to Mike later on. Again, I suppose within the realms of needling people, but still just something like a little just off kilter, off putting about it, which I haven't really seen elsewhere in how he talks to people at the table. And then, yeah, I mean, Mike has been sort of hyped, has been bobbing and weaving throughout the coverage. They keep showing his tweets where he's just saying things like, this is my time, I'm going to win. Every time it cuts over to him, they say, it's him saying like, this is my time, I'm winning. But we don't really see anything from him. We're being told this narrative rather than being shown this narrative. And again, we know that he's going to win at the end. So, the tweets are a little bit of foreshadowing for that. But you could build that up better if you actually, again, show us how he's playing at the table.
And plus, he was never in the main TV table, so that kind of again hurts things when you're giving the majority of your screen time to that main table. So that's also part of the problem. Otherwise, again, it was okay. I mean, the pacing obviously bothered me a little bit there, but nothing super egregious. It's just I thought, by round of 16 maybe it'd be a little bit better.
Yeah.
With episode 8, we get the final half of the round of 16. Doc Sands against Phil Hellmuth, and then no, obviously the rest of our players who have survived at this point. The Hellmuth Doc Sands battle was probably the best poker battle we had seen, at least for me, up until this point. We saw some very aggressive Hellmuth play. He had talked about in interviews how he had restudied the game, prepared for the math, and was really kind of operating on that level. And it definitely shows for the most part. He does play very well. And there's a pretty crazy run out with queens against nines pre-flop all in. That Doc Sands flops a 9, and then Hellmuth rivers a queen to win the hand. So again, it was a very exciting battle, and there was even a king queen versus king queen suited free roll flush off that ends up sinking Doc Sands' ship. So again, a very entertaining battle altogether with that main table in this episode.
Yeah, that hand was just so sick. I mean, oh my God. And Hellmuth's credit, he says that it was just luck. He doesn't, with hands like that, he doesn't tend to rub people's face in it, which I like. But yeah, I mean, the Sands Hellmuth battle goes on for 3.5 hours. I mean, they really duked it out. It really could have gone either way. So yeah, I mean, that was really entertaining to watch.
Yeah, and I had so many highlights in this episode that I was like, this is just by default the best episode, because look at all these highlights I have here. I mean, it's impossible for it not to be the best episode just by virtue of the how many highlights I had. On the other tables, there's a lot of exciting action too. You have a Tom Dwan Jack 6 blow up. You have Joe Siroc winning of Ace 5 against Jacks for 98% of all the chips in play and stuff like that. It's just Jacks into kings. Just a lot of big hands running into big hands. It was just really good.
This could be it here.
No.
At Ace Jack.
I was behind. I'm probably going to lose this match, guys, but that's okay. Anyway, so oh wow, yep, I'm going to lose.
Well, let's see. There's still over.
All right, same. I didn't play great, but I also didn't get too many hands. So, all right, guys, the match is over. Sam wins, but we all know from Sam's Mind Sport Olympiad accomplishments that he's the better player than me. So that's okay.
No, you're a better player than me. You are a better player.
You just crushed me in half an hour.
I had like kings like 5 times. I got like a boat a bunch of times. Everybody who saw the footage, you all know.
We'll let all the viewers decide if I played horribly or I had like 2 pairings, better 2 pairs, like pretty gross, but that's okay. In any case, so back to the matter here. So with episode 8 was fantastic. Yeah, obviously being a big part of that. Doc Sands, that battle was great. With the next episode, moving on to episode 9 here, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here, the round of 8. And so we have they play 2 tables at a time, but it takes up half of the episode. So instead of just playing all at once, which I don't know, I guess you could have just done that. But at the very least, it means that the action, there's something happening at all times with the blinds being at a reasonable level. The Jungleman Seaver table had some very enjoyable verbal sparring, actually. Yeah. Like Kate's kind of saying like, I don't think you're like super good. Just like weird off the cuff comments like that was pretty funny. And then just the amount of lying by Seaver, lying in poker is always funny usually, and Seaver is a great job of putting a couple of those lies at work. The main table in the first half was John Hennigan and Mike Matusow. I thought it was kind of a dud match personally. I didn't think that it was a particularly memorable one, but I did enjoy the Seaver Cates battle, and then the second half I didn't really care for other match either. It was a pretty big dud episode altogether. Besides the enjoyable sparring between Jungleman and Seaver.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, Siroc and Hastings aren't people I care about too much. Kachalov, yeah, same deal. I mean, Kachalov's respectful toward Hellmuth. So it's no real problem. But yeah, nothing super flashy though. I was kind of laughing at Matusow saying he's got the whole world in his hands. I thought that was kind of funny. Just Matusow, whenever he sings, it's just funny. I don't know why. Not that he has like an especially bad voice, but it's just funny to see that.
Yeah. So again, I was let them as episode, but at the very least, it got us down to round of 4, which was at the same point that the ESPN coverage of the 2011 heads up championship was with the Final Four, and so we enjoyed that for the most part. So I was mildly optimistic that the Final Four onward would be really exciting, but I didn't think that the round of 4 poker play was all that great. Some of the table antics pretty good, but the actual poker dynamic at the action wasn't so exciting for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, it's again the talk between Seaver and Matusow was pretty interesting. Just the passive aggressive behavior going back and forth, but both of them just competing to who can make the most passive aggressive arrogant line. I thought was just really funny. Yeah, I mean, Hellmuth versus Sirach. Sirach, Hellmuth is just a better player than Sirach. I'm not trying to be mean to the guy or anything, but nothing super exciting in terms of his play. But yeah, seeing Matusow at the end, be so excited he's going to take on Hellmuth. That was almost worth the whole thing. It's just like, all right, here we go. Let's see just the two Titans battle with each other.
Yeah, and there was an amusing little shade versus no shades battle of sorts of Sirach and Hellmuth. That was kind of funny. But I guess maybe the one poker element of the episode that was interesting or exciting was that there were 2 tables that were all in at the same time.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of cool. You don't see that too often when there's only 2 tables happening. Yeah. Imagine if the main event that happened on the bubble or something. That'd be pretty. I mean, that happens on the bubble, but I mean, at right. Tables or something. Seaver chokes away a huge lead to Matusow. So I was like, almost like, well, at some point the cards have to go against Matusow, go for Matusow because he's almost out of chips here. And then Seaver kind of, I don't know, he kind of chokes it away. I mean, he had some bad runouts, bad luck too, but Matusow sneaks in. Obviously, we know he's going to win, so it's not too invested in who's going to win. It's more about how they win.
Right.
But again, as the appetizer for the finals, I was definitely a bit let down by this episode. But at the very least, we get the 2 loudest, the 2 proudest, and 2 of my favorite poker players in the championship match, which, to my surprise, is the only round that was best of 3. I would have guessed that the Final Four would have had a best of 3, but I guess that's why I hadn't did it before, so I was just guessing at that point.
Yeah, I mean, easily the Final Four could have been best of 3, and then the final 2 could have been best of 5 or something. They could have done that. Yeah, and they decided to stretch this out over 2 episodes, which is an interesting decision, I guess. Again, it leaves more time to see hands play out, a little bit more tension, I suppose, a little bit more table talk. But I don't think it's super necessary. There's not super interesting poker on display here, I don't think.
Especially since one of the interview segment bits was Road to Finals, and they had done something like that for the semifinals with all 4 players. So it was, again, kind of superfluous to do it again for just 1 round later for 2 players. And you could tell, they added there were a couple more. There's maybe 4, 5, or 6, bits in these episodes compared to maybe 2 or 3 or 4 from the early episodes. They were trying to fill time a little bit for these last 2. And of the best of 3 match championship round, the first episode 11, is only match 1, and then episode 12 is match 2 and match 3 because Hellmuth wins match 2 to keep things going. And so the Hellmuth has the early lead in match 1, and then he's playing from behind pretty much from the 1/3 mark onward until he ends up losing. And so, again, it's Hellmuth getting angry after a little bit, and Matusow kind of rubbing it in and stuff. So that's pretty funny stuff. But and actually, I actually found that Hellmuth's play was pretty solid too. I didn't feel like he played poorly, even though he lost round 1. It was just more of a, it's just kind of how the cards go a bit better for one player, and it's going to have a big result in the end.
Yeah, there's just so much good table talk, though. I mean, just all throughout the whole episode. I mean, it's hard for me to pick my favorite line because there's just so much from both of them, too. I mean, Mike is clearly making fun of Hellmuth, but Hellmuth is also just again, it's that difficult line with Hellmuth where it's like, how much of this is him playing to the cameras and how much of this is himself? And I really feel like here, this is himself, like him getting frustrated, him responding to Matusow, because Matusow keeps saying, it's my time to win. So Hellmuth goes like, I play with a lot of guys who say they're destined to win. I've beat them. And just things like that is just so funny.
Yeah, and Matusow does play very well, even though I thought Hellmuth played well. They both play well. It's just that in heads up, sometimes a little move won't work, and it looks like it's terrible, but really it's just in the grand scheme of things, one hand. And so I thought it was kind of middle of the pack episode for the whole season. I thought it was still very solid, just maybe not my favorite.
Yeah.
And episode 12, the final episode, I think was even better than part one of the championship round. And even though that it has to squeeze in 2 matches instead of 1 match, I didn't feel it was all that rushed. And I love the psychology of like this friendly but unfriendly vibe that they both give off to each other. Like they're close friends, but they just will spar each other. Like I'm a twin, so I have that same idea with my twin brother, for example. And so I can appreciate that level too. And so even though they're yelling at each other and they're upset, they're also happy for each other. So it's a really fun sort of paradoxical moment there.
Yeah, I mean, they've established throughout that, they're good friends. They'll go out drinking afterward, but they're just both so competitive people. They want to win. I think they're playing for, I think, $350,000. I think first place was 750,000 and second was 400,000. Quite a lot of money. So I can understand why they'd be so competitive. And a ring or something, not a bracelet, but like a little ring, which kind of looks cool. But there's a competitive spirit here that I do really like.
Yeah, and so again, the action here, Hellmuth actually relies on a king's losing against his ace king hand to take down match 2. And then Hellmuth makes a bizarre dark bet with Jack High in round 3. And then, but Matusow really controls match 3 from the whole way down. Even in the final hand, Hellmuth is low enough in chips where Matusow actually ponders making a mathematically incorrect call with a flush draw with 1 card to come against top pair. And Hellmuth, just the antics of that all in on the last hand was just so funny because he's like, yes, no snap call. That's all I was about it. No snap call. And then Matusow's like, I got a flush draw. I guess I can go for the win, right? I'm going for the win. And then if Matusow loses that hand, they're about even in chips with that in that third match. So he's like, well, there's a 1/5 chance it's just over now. Doesn't matter. And so Matusow takes it with the diamond on the river. Hellmuth is like angry, but he's like kind of like, that's why I'm the best. That's one of the best. They're so bad that they need to make these bad calls to beat me. And so he's trying to like make himself look better than he actually came off as when he loses the match. And then when Matusow says, you gotta do the best when you're playing a guy of your caliber, he like starts to the sky with this like weird like shaky head dead stare, like ugh. That was just the funniest thing for me.
It was great, yeah. So good.
Yeah. And so I like the finale. I had seen I think the majority of the final battle before, but I hadn't seen any of the build up. And honestly, if you only watch the last 2 episodes of this show, you probably would be okay. I mean, it's given 3 matches. It's the most enjoyable showdown, and it's not at the cost of other tables happening concurrently where you get one hand of them. So I thought it was if you only watch the finale, you wouldn't be too worse off.
Oh, absolutely. I think you could just watch these 2 episodes and you'd be all set. If I had to watch this again, like I would watch these 2 episodes again. These were a lot of fun to watch, even if they weren't perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, and the structure of this tournament, the blinds. Luckily, when it's just 3 matches, they don't play quite as scared poker because like, oh, there's another match afterwards otherwise. So it doesn't get into those super high levels where they have like 10 big blinds each, like we saw in like Invitational, Poker Superstars Invitational, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So all in all, a pretty solid program. Obviously, there were a few dead episodes mixed in there, but I was happy I saw it. Even if I didn't care for a good number of the matches, I still think collectively it still works as a program. And it's unfortunate that they didn't have a 2014 and onward event, but as a sort of having a Matusow Hellmuth square show off at the end for the final season is a pretty good ending.
Yeah, absolutely. The ending is what makes this. If it was any other ending, I think it wouldn't work as well. But this was just, again, see these 2 guys with this history scoring off against each other was a really good cherry on top. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, some of these matches were a lot of fun to watch. Others of them not so much. This format definitely needed some work. The editing needed some work so we have a better sense of these other people. But yeah, I mean, overall, I definitely don't think this is. I have more positive impressions than negative impressions. Of the negative impressions are worth noting of this tournament. And yeah, I mean, I would definitely be curious to see if PokerGo were to try this, what they would do with it and how they would sharpen the format.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine if we had a C-Rock Seaver finale, it just changed your whole perception of this whole season, though. It's so they really lucked that had as good a finale as they did. And so, I do think Heads Up Poker has merits to TV. I do think that I still like watching a tournament where the 2 people are and then they square off, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Which leads us into probably the most long-awaited review of this podcast. We finally got a hold of a copy of Rounders on DVD. Very exciting to finally watch. Now, I have seen clips of the show, mostly the poker scenes, but maybe a few other conversation scenes on YouTube and whatnot, or other movies referencing it or whatnot. Obviously, other poker documentaries show clips of Rounders here and there. It got me into the game as one of the topics or whatever. But this is my first time sitting down watching this film from opening credits to end credits, and so I came in with decent expectations here. I'd only seen maybe like 1/5, 1/4 of the actual footage before, so the rest of it was brand new. And to my satisfaction, actually, because the stuff I hadn't seen before, I mostly enjoyed, and I have obviously a very different history of this film as you do. What was your background here of this movie?
Yeah, so this is the second time I've seen it all the way through. I saw it once, I think, on YouTube somewhere, the whole thing all the way through. And then obviously I've seen all the poker clips. They're in everything. Every compilation about poker ever has these poker clips. So I mean, after watching the movie for the first time, I give like a 3 out of 5. I thought it was, okay. It's an interesting neo noir film. It has this sort of neo noir, smoky back alley New York vibe. Made in the 1990s by grown Harvey Weinstein at Miramax Studios. With, again, a very impressive cast. We have Matt Damon, John Turturro. We have Edward Norton playing Matt Damon's sort of loser buddy, who we'll get into. And then obviously Teddy KGB, played by Mr. John Malkovich, as well as a bunch of other supporting people, Gretchen Mol, Femke Janssen, a lot of other sort of pretty decent character actors in the mix here. Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I definitely say like, yeah, 3 out of 5. I know I normally give the score at the end, but that's definitely my impression of this. This is a pretty tolerable, entertaining enough neo noir film about poker. And I can definitely see why it's the #1 poker movie, given, go and watch all the poker movies we've reviewed on this podcast. It doesn't have much competition for the title, but it is a very competently made movie that sort of gives you a sense of this world of poker at this time in the late 90s.
I agree. I was trying to think, is it my favorite poker movie? And I feel that the poker in this movie, the actual poker, is better than Molly's Game's poker, but the movie isn't as good as Molly's Game.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think the poker being good is important, because compared to like movies like All In, where the poker was absolutely atrocious and the acting was terrible, this movie is very well acted. It's very slick. It's well paced. It's well edited. The sound is great. The lighting, everything. The basic movie principles are all very solid. And up until maybe the last like 10, 15 minutes, I probably would have gone like 3.5 out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
But then the ending kind of didn't sit. Once I knew the full context of that poker showdown between KGB and Mike, I felt like it didn't work as well as it did in isolation when I hadn't seen the full context. So that's why I kind of go back to the 3 out of 5 level that you give the movie, which we'll get to. We'll go in order here, but I still enjoyed it. I'm happy I saw it. And 3 out of 5 film, people think that sounds negative. It's not like 4 or 5, but it still means you enjoyed it. It was just compared to other movies in that same genre, it's just not something above the grade.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, Molly's Game, I think, definitely is more competent than this. You have Aaron Sorkin, who's just a really, flashy, fun screenwriter to watch. This was directed by John Dahl, who some people may remember as the director of certain episodes of a television show we reviewed called Tilt. And also that the guys who wrote this also wrote and produced Tilt. And it is funny to put those two properties in conversation with each other, not just because Tilt is so incompetent you just wouldn't believe it, but also that you can tell, like, yeah, there's a lot of stylistic similarities between the two. There's narration throughout. There's, again, this sort of neo-noir sort of back alley vibe. The good, handsome main character has to, play poker with these seedy criminals and get involved with these seedy criminals and all that. But yeah, a lot more competently made than Tilt was. There's nothing super impressive in terms of the editing and cinematography, but just the overall vibe. Like, all of the poker rooms feel like these back rooms that are tucked away somewhere that, you and I wouldn't know about, but if you're in the know, you know where these are. And little things like when Mike walks into a room, all these poker players, we see these like Russian, criminals and these Italian criminals, but they look at Mike and they say like, "Hey, Mike, how you doing?" Like little things like that can just build a world and make you see like, oh, Mike is this respected poker player in this back room, and these guys who would mess with everybody else wouldn't mess with Mike because they know who he is. Little things like that really flesh out the character.
Absolutely, and I do feel this film has a few very great characters as far as the execution of what the how their development ties into the overarching themes of the flick. So themes that you wouldn't expect necessarily to be in a poker drama movie. So things like friendship, the male ego, playing it straight, but your past, grabbing a hold of you and pulling you back into your old bad habits. Things like this that I really, those were the elements that I really appreciated the most in this movie. So getting to when we were sitting down and watching this film, so I had this. It's not the original release of the DVD. It's like this like collector's like classic movies type branded DVD. So we popped the disc in, and the menu screen like completely fools us right off the bat. We're like, oh, is the film already starting? And it's actually a scene of them walking up to one of the poker club rooms, or the little like slot opens up for the person just looking out the window, and that's the main menu. And so that was actually really funny. I thought the actual just the literal DVD menu screens were great right off the bat.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, and when you click like hit on the movie, there's this little animation of you like walking down the hallway into the poker room. That was kind of neat. Yeah, and then there's like on the DVD, it was like a like commentary and something else, like how to play poker and all that. It's really just the movie. Ben got it for $4 at a store. So
FYE in
FYE.
the Holyoke Mall is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so the movie begins, and it's a very slick first few minutes. And to the movie's credit, actually, the first couple of scenes actually give us a pretty good chance to learn about a few select characters in short order in some pretty good detail. John Turturro's character, Mike, his girlfriend, everyone, and even when his release from prison buddy gets out of prison, we get to know enough about each character so that right off the top we know who they are, so that their actions later on actually mean something to us. So the basic mechanics and structure of the first, say, 15-20 minutes is very well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just like little things like, Matt Damon is going through his apartment collecting his money to go to Teddy KGB's room. And he's like opening up books. There's like 5K hidden underneath this book. There's 10K hidden underneath this book. But he still takes time to go out of his way and kiss his girlfriend on the forehead before he leaves. So it's like, okay, this guy cares about people. He's not just playing poker just because he's some degenerate gambler. He does have connections and people that he works with. And, we see John Turturro talking, and there's a little bit of narration about him. We also have a little bit of conversation between him and Matt Damon. So it's, again, this movie does take its time in places to let scenes settle, and so that we understand who these characters are, unlike Tilt.
Exactly. And all of this sets the stage for Mike's first big poker, action of the movie, where he plays a pretty crazy hand with Ace Nine. This is like in a cash game scene, but the hand devolves into Mike versus Teddy KGB. And again, it speaks to the age of this movie, which is now 25 years ago. This is the 25th anniversary of this movie, right, where someone thinks that raising with all his money, his life work, his life savings, basically, with the third nuts, is a good idea in a poker game.
Yeah, I mean, you've all seen this hand, so I don't think we need to go over it. But yeah, it's just a crazy, crazy hand. Just doesn't make sense by anyone's, again, I've never played poker for money, and I'm just sitting here going, like, what the heck are you doing, Matt Damon? Yeah, it's a crazy hand to think about, obviously, by 2023 poker standards. But again, the scene does a good job. And this is, again, one of the times where narration does work, where we get a sense of like, okay, why is Matt Damon making these decisions? Okay, against an average guy, I would do this, but against Teddy, he knows that I would do that, so I have to do something else. All right, I've got a boat, so I'm going to do this. And then, even the cheesy line, I'm thinking of Vegas and the fucking Mirage. Again, we're getting a sense of he has this ego. He has this idea of he wants to play big. It's not just enough for him to make a living. He wants to be splashy and really be a big name in the game. And that's why he does it at the end. And that's something that's going to recur throughout the rest of the movie.
and his choice, his decision to re-raise all in on River really was, one of two moments that just didn't ring true for me. Because he was, if he calls that raise by Teddy KGB or the bet or whatever it was, he's still up on the day. He has like 33,000. He's literally counting. I love it. So you bet 15K. I still have 203,000. So if he puts in the 15K, he's up 3K on the night. Okay, you're still okay. You're not broke if you lose. But he re-raises it and then loses. But so even though I didn't buy that poker decision, obviously by our modern standards, I did love Matt Damon's acting on it. Like literally his face once he loses the hands, not overly like, oh my god, I blew it. He's just like silent. He's like frozen, and just that was really organic acting right there.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And then, just Teddy going, I don't have the spades. Ace is full, Mike. It's just, it's a good moment. And of course, part of me just, I think, how funny would it be if he just goes, Ace is full, and then Matt Damon turns over pocket nines and he's rolling? That would have just been funny, but,
As that's more tilt standards, not
yeah, tilt
rounders, not rounders. Standards. And so this is kind of a turning point in the narrative. It kind of cuts forward in time to Matt Damon's now got a full-time job. He's in law school, which I feel like that subplot could have had a little bit more time.
Yeah.
I guess just speaking to so the Matt Damon's character, Mike, is a law student with his girlfriend, and we don't really see Matt Damon in like he's like this big awesome lawyer law student. Like we don't see him like in any scene where he's like excelling academically, or he's like impressing his classmates or his group mates. So it kind of made me wonder. This probably could have had one or two more scenes to kind of legitimize that subplot. I mean, now it's more about his girlfriend than about the law school, I guess, to a certain degree, at least in the first half of the movie, until the professor kind of gets in the mix there. But I don't know, this is maybe one of the weaker elements of the script which is why maybe Molly's Game was a bit better in my hierarchy. That was but that I mean I appreciate that he's an intelligent guy and this is another way to use his intellect in reading people, but it needed a bit more time in the oven.
Absolutely, yeah. And also one of those classic Hollywood cliches where you have two law students, right? People who don't have a lot of money, and they're living in New York City. And this apartment is amazing. I mean, there's like 3 rooms. They have a television. They have everything all set up. It's like, where did you get the money for all this?
Maybe like scholarship. I don't know. The school paid for it. I don't know.
It's a little weird.
Yeah. And so really the inciting incident in this plot is when Worm gets out of prison. And he went into prison with debt, which was accumulating interest.
Right.
And so because Worm needs money, it starts a chain of events. And this is probably for me the best part of the whole movie, just following the through line of the money that Worm owes and the ramifications it has across all elements of Worm's life, Mike's life, and also just how that money number, how one little number that someone said he owes money, I'll pay you this for that, and how that number can spiral out of control in this underground poker world.
Yeah, it's very straightforward. He has to pay money, and Mike is an old friend of his. Mike can't obviously pay all of Worm's debt right off the bat because he just lost all his money to Teddy KGB. So Mike stakes him and kind of tries to stay away from Worm's problems, but eventually gets sort of roped in and tied in. He's, also Mike's trying to step away from the game forever and focus on his law career because he just blew all his money and his girlfriend's upset at him. So yeah, I mean, it's a very straightforward, understandable dynamic. They seem, again, it's Edward Norton playing Worm, who's a terrific actor. So him and Matt Damon just have a good rapport with each other. You can tell that they're good friends, that they have some chemistry and background together. There's a very long narration. It feels like it goes on for like a minute, but it must have been shorter, with just Matt Damon just explaining like his relationship with Edward Norton. I feel like you don't even need that. You could really just have Edward Norton walking out of prison and talking to Matt Damon, and just off of their acting, you can get a sense of their chemistry and their history. And there's again a lot of, as I mentioned, there's all these poker rooms that they go to try to make money, and all these sort of like little schemes that they play with each other, which I really like. And again, it just gives a sense of this world and how many other rooms there must be that we don't even see that they could be playing at.
Yeah, and so the Siskel and Ebert review of Rounders, Ebert refers to the movie as kind of a Rocky-ish poker picture, where Rocky loses the first match, trains, and then beats the same guy in the ending. It's not quite a matter of training, but you don't get the sense that Mike or Worm were improving in poker skills over the course of the film. But nonetheless, it's a showdown that goes wrong. Shouldn't happens later. But I think it's the middle section of the Rocky films that people undervalue, even though that's really cool. And for me, the same thing for Ramos here. Everything happens kind of in between the two KGB fights. I was really enthralled with, as far as how Worm he finds out that Gramo bought up his debts, and then Grandma was kind of working for him, though it's kind of implied that maybe that wasn't the case. And so Worm just can't help himself. It's almost is an addict, but he's a poker scam gambling addict. And really, Mike is the only one that suffers on because Worm, he's got nothing to lose anyway. He's literally out of prison. He's got one suit, one pair of shoes, and a hat. Like that's literally all he has to his name besides his name. And so Mike is the only one with anything really worth losing, and he loses a lot. He loses his health. He gets punched a whole bunch. He loses his girl. He loses his sense of security and safety. And so really, for me, this ties into really the downsides of not having security in your life. The Maslow hierarchy of needs, having shelter, food, family, relationships, sense of self-actualization, how poker can take all those away in one fell swoop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people forget about these. I'd forgotten about most of this sort of subplot in this half of the movie when I was watching it, and I was like, oh yeah, these are actually pretty good scenes. Watching this tension build. Granted, it's not absolutely perfect writing or anything. There's an obligatory strip club scene, which he's really just there so that Worm can get beaten up in an exotic place, I suppose. I don't know how to put it. Yeah, and then we mentioned this sort of law professor who sort of weaves in and out. He first appears in this scene in the judges game where Matt Damon kind of sets it up like, here's this judges game where like all these top judges meet with each other and you can get screwed over. Some guy gets a parking ticket because he plays in this game, and this kind of just almost silly scene where Mike just walks into the middle of the hand and manages to read everybody's cards like Sherlock Holmes. Like he just knows what everyone is doing. And impresses everybody. And yeah, it does kind of get referred to later on, but it just feels out of nowhere. And then there's this other scene where he just like goes to some bar or something and bumps into his law professor. And there's this like very long scene where the law professor talks about how he was supposed to be a rabbi and his family was all like, every single man in his family had been a rabbi, and he went and became a lawyer and broke his parents' hearts, which just feels very on the nose. And just kind of out of place from, this is literally right after the strip club scene where Edward Norton gets beaten up. So it's a little weird.
Yeah, that was maybe the one scene I mentally checked out a little bit. I was like, this really doesn't need to be here, or he's not that important for character.
Yeah.
I mean, he does spotlight the 10 Gs later in the movie, but I don't know. I felt like we were missing one or two more law school related scenes where we really solidified how serious Mike was taking law school, because you get the sense that it was kind of an afterthought to him or into the movie as well. So I don't know. I didn't quite buy it. But intercut in this movie is probably the most talked about scene in this movie is the Johnny Chan monologue story where Mike tracks down John Turturro at a spa, I guess. And he talks about how he played with the best and won, whereas Turturro is kind of like, I gotta pay alimony, I gotta pay rent, I gotta pay for food. His character really embodies the sort of the low risk, low reward, but profitable poker path that some players do take. And so that scene, it's a hand where Johnny Chan folds in limit poker, which we just played, and I feel like even if you thought someone was bluffing, you just call the last little bet at the end just to see the cards. And so it's kind of a joke that they picked limit hold'em of all the games to serve as that story. I thought maybe it could have been better if it had been no limit hold'em, but that was just me.
Yeah, I mean, he pulled off a bluff once. That happens all the time, and we just watched 12 episodes of a Heads Up show. There are all these players bluffing other players. That doesn't mean you're like, it's the way like he acts like he's hot shit after pulling this off. It's like, yeah, you did one bluff, that was it.
I mean, the top pros, they make money by minimizing their losses when they're beat. So they're going to fold sometimes, they're going to win sometimes. So it's in and like in the movie All In, Michael Madsen's character is like, I never lose because nobody ever calls me, or like I never, you know, or whatever. It's like, well, that's not how poker works.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, there's all these sort of little moments where just, with a 2023 poker intelligence, it's just sort of funny, there's a line like, why do you think the same five guys make it to the final table every year? Just little things like that. We're just like, oh yeah, that's where the game used to be.
Exactly, exactly. And then really as things build up, so the main the sort of the second act and the end and start of the third act kind of builds into they need to come up with $15,000 in 5 days, and so they got to play around the clock for 5 straight days to make that money because Gremo Mike vouches for Worm to Gremo, who now has they don't know it quite yet, but he has connections to KGB, and so I assume the idea is like Gramo wants his money. Like
Right.
he bought Worm's debt for like 60 cents on the dollar or whatever it was, and then added interest to it. So now it's back to 100%. And so we're supposed to think that Gramo wants his money. He doesn't he gets nothing if he's not paid. Like just that's simple, right? So he should want to be paid his money. Remember that point, okay? So after Worm can't help himself in this police officer game. They lose everything, get beat up. Mike is covered in bruises. He ends up begging his professor for any money to help him to pay off this debt. And another thing that I didn't quite get is if Petrovsky is willing to give him $10,000, is 15K really all that crazy? Like I feel like
Yeah.
what's the point of only giving 10,000 if you know that's not enough, and he's presumably a pretty wealthy figure in New York. So I don't know, that didn't quite ring true for me.
Yeah. It's just kind of odd. It's an odd amount. Like if it was $150,000, okay, that'd be something. But yeah, 15 just feels a little insubstantial.
Yeah, and so that gets us to the big final showdown of round one of two of the final showdown, which is KGB and Mike in a 1v1 freeze out 10K blinds 25 from 50, winner take all, no one until someone busts. And so this first one arguably, the mechanics of the very first hand, where Mike has two kings and KGB raises in half his stack, just makes no sense from a poker mathematical perspective whatsoever. But besides that, I don't know, it wasn't too egregious. But besides that one detail,
There's only a couple hands. I mean,
yeah,
there's for all the talk about this being the greatest poker movie ever, there's very few hands. We didn't talk about there's a moment earlier where they go to the Trump Taj Mahal, which again also just 1990s. It was funny. There's this, they go to the Trump Taj Mahal, and everybody who's in the movie is there. Femke Jansen's there, John Turturro's there, and there's this kind of interesting montage where just two people just keep showing up at the table where they're all playing, and they're all just like licking their chops, like we're just gonna cut these amateurs up and take all their money. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, there's a lot of scenes of just sort of Mike and Worm talking, or Mike trying to meet up with his law school buddies at a cafeteria, but John Turturro shows up. And so, Mike has to leave. There's a lot of other non-poker scenes. Some of them are okay, some of them aren't. Just by the end, when you get to these poker scenes, it almost feels like the poker's out of place. I mean, just kind of odd.
yeah. I think if you counted all the hands that are shown in this film, I think it's actually fewer hands than All In had of Dominic Swain.
Yeah.
Kind of funny actually. With Mike checking round one, he's now has $20,000 in his hand. So if he pays off the 15,000 that's owed to Gramo/KGB, he's got 5K left, which is half of what he can give to Petrovsky. And guess what, Mike? You can play with that 5K anywhere else in the world. And if you're as good as you think you are, then you can just double it to 10K or more and then pay him off, and you're safe and sound. So I just could not believe that that Mike chose to sit back down when the whole theme of the movie felt like it was all about overcoming your past, overcoming the bad influence on your life, and being the best possible you. And instead, he sits down and plays for risking all of the money and risking, I guess, his life. I don't know if they're going to kill him or if they're going to like, I don't know what they were going to do. It's kind of unclear. I just didn't buy that at all.
Yeah, again, as you mentioned, like, does Grandma want to be paid or not? Because like Ramo's sitting by and he's like all aggressive and he's like staring at Mike. It's like, do you want to beat this guy up? Why? He can't get your money for you if you kill him. I can understand wanting to kill Worm. I mean, Worm's this sort of sleazy guy, but Mike, like, he was a law student. He seems like an upstanding guy. Why beat him up? Just, the stakes again just don't quite work.
Also, if he's gonna be a lawyer, isn't it kind of good to have like a lawyer on your side? You know, how many crime films have like a lawyer, a dirty lawyer on their side? Like that's like kind of perfect. Like you could have had like, you know what? If when you become a lawyer, you're gonna work for us. You're gonna get us, scot free on all these crimes we do. Like that could have been something. There's runners too right there.
Yeah, there you go.
But no, Mike decides he wants to play, and obviously things go poorly for him until he spots the Oreo tell, which people have. It's kind of a narm little tell of sorts, but Oreos are very tasty, so okay, good for them, I guess. But again, it just did not ring true why he would not just take his money and go and double it and triple it somewhere else where he's less likely to get beat up for some by angry Russians or something. I don't know. I mean, you literally have there's no Petrovsky gave him like no time restriction on when to pay him back. So literally just get out of Dodge and go and play poker anywhere else. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and it's also disappointing that Mike starts, he comes, sits back down, says double the blinds. Teddy JB says yeah, and then all of a sudden, like, we just cut, and Mike has no chips, and he's about to put it all in with two pair. Have a montage or something where we show Mike losing. Maybe like he thinks that he's gonna beat Teddy KGB quickly because he won the first round, so it messes with his head or something. Just to have all of a sudden, like, he's up in chips, then he's down in chips out of nowhere. And then also after he spots the tell, again, we just cut to another hand. There's no montage, there's no buildup or anything. And, we all know how the last hand goes. So.
Yeah, and then when Mike traps KGB with the nut straight of 9-8 suited against a mystery hand that we never know, that, TV tropes or Doug Polk can speculate on what he actually had. Gramo is angry. He's pissed. He flips the table. Like, what was he hoping for? Did he want to get paid or did he want to not get paid? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Like, what was his ideal scenario? That Mike loses, he gets paid. I mean, I guess they're getting his money, I guess, one way or another, but it's not the Worm money. So I don't know. I guess he wanted to get the money twice. Like, I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, there needed to be a scene or something where like Mike pissed him off or something that would explain why he's so angry toward him. There's like one scene where Mike goes to talk to him, but they seem fine. It's not like Mike interrupts Grandma when he's doing something or anything. Yeah, it's just a very odd moment. And then, yeah, the hand itself, again, Doug Polk's gone over it. Everybody has talked about this hand. It's just weird. It's just a weird handle line that Teddy KGB takes. I mean, people speculate that he had pocket aces. People speculate that he had pocket tens. Like,
So,
whatever he has.
Nothing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the ace made him feel good. So maybe like ace 10. What do I know? I don't know. I mean, he didn't re-raise pre-flop, so I think that kind of rules out aces. I didn't get a trap vibe from him on the pre-flop. So he's just like, okay, I call.
Yeah, I mean, it's just weird. It's
Right.
a weird spot.
And so by virtue of Mike ending with $30,000 to his name, he was, obviously KGB. The implication is that KGB rebought into
Right.
when he was turning down after the tell was spotted. So Mike restores his bankroll of $30,000, which he had at the start of the film. Which, by the way, 30,000 doesn't go very far at the Roses of Poker. Like, that's maybe, this is back when they only had like a handful of events every year. So that's maybe like going to buy you, you play the main event, that's 1/3 right there. You play a 5K, a $2,500, that's only a handful of events. Plus you guys have food and travel and hotel and stuff. So really, it's not that much money. I feel like that, 30K is just way too much of a bankroll.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, there's just little details, or like, again, you get the sense of this world that this is building. Then there's just like little things like that where it's like it's just not quite realistic. It's like they didn't quite have a handle on how the WSOP worked almost. I mean, yeah, the main event's $10,000 right there. I'm assuming he's putting he's gonna buy all of it in on himself. He's not gonna trade action or somebody. There's no talk about things like trading action or staking people or anything like that, which I know wasn't as much of a thing in the '90s, but it was still there. It would have
Well,
been interesting.
Turturro does offer
Yeah,
to take Mike after he loses a big hand early, but
that's true.
that's very true.
Yeah.
Um, but otherwise, I mean, so the he loses the girl by the end, but I kind of like the sentiment they left that on. There's kind of a final scene where Mike's walking away, saying goodbye, and she's kind of like she's not angry at him. She's kind of it's who he is, and she accepts that. I kind of thought that was a relatively mature and non cliche way of ending things with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that. And that she's also not treated like a bad person. That, she doesn't want Mike to play poker for good reason. He just blew $30,000 at a hand that he shouldn't have been playing. She gets that, this is who he is, and that they just have to part ways. I do like that.
And she tried to change him or sort of help him, and it didn't work out. But as she knows that he's happy doing that, so she needs to be happy for him. Otherwise, it's too much to ask of herself. And
Yeah.
otherwise, Worm doesn't really get too much of a like comeuppance. I mean, he kind of runs away. He just leaves
Yeah.
town, and so Mike does ultimately save him. So maybe he'll eventually learn that in the rumor mill somewhere. But really, this movie thematically, it only feels like those two, the Mike X couple here really get the most conclusion to their story. I mean, Turturro, he's kind of a mentor figure. He's not really like a doesn't develop per se. He's just kind of there.
Mhm.
That's me a little bit of a let them, considering how much I was enjoyed by the introductory scenes of all these characters. But nonetheless, I'm still pretty happy with how the film ended, like that.
Yeah, it's an okay ending. He's going to go off to Vegas, and again, as a final note, to just to send the signal home of just how out of date the movie is. He says first prize of the World Series of Poker is $1 million, and of course last year it was $10 million.
Now,
Yeah,
I guess if they were going to do like a remake of Runners, you'd have to make the bankroll $300,000, and then the main event $10 million to kind of inflation and stuff. I don't know.
pretty much. Yeah.
So that ends things again. Even though there are little things that I didn't like, the ending didn't quite live up to the build up, and there's some inorganic detailings in the script. I still think overall it works better than maybe the tone of our comments do. And I'm happy I saw it. I understand why it's such a important film in so many poker players' history. Um, if we didn't watch any of the bonus footage, but I guess the commentary would be something I'd like to kind of listen to once, just to hear about some of the finer details of making the film. But
Mm-hmm.
I like some of the themes. I like the acting. I like a lot of here. I just thought that it's just an average movie, but it's a good average movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's again totally tolerable. It's just competently made. Obviously, having a really good cast helps. Yeah, I mean, just the characters for the most part. Mike is your standard. He's a good poker player. He's a good guy, but there's just not that whole much there. John Turturro is sort of this mentor character who plays the game to make money because he has bills to pay and kids to feed. But again, not a whole lot there. I mean, I'd say the big problem with the characterization is Worm to me just comes off as unlikable throughout the whole movie, just kind of like hiding away and kind of sleazy, and you're just kind of left wondering like, why is Mike going to the fence for this guy? Outside of the acting rapport between Matt Damon and Edward Norton, I don't see like why you would go to the fences for this guy. And then yeah, none of the other characters feel that substantial. Teddy KGB is your Russian mobster bad guy. Very enjoyable because of the performance, of course. But yeah,
I mean,
on the whole, yeah, I mean, there's a veneer of competence. There's a veneer of credibility throughout in terms of the poker play. But again, you just start to get into the little details about a lot of things, and things don't hold up. So yeah, I mean, a 3 out of 5 is still what I would give it.
well, that's also true of many movies. I'm not saying that's
Yeah.
unique to this film. Plenty of films, if you fine tune the script, you're going to find a lot of holes here and there. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't sink the ship, but it's afloat. Ship's afloat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the only in terms of like real technically bad thing was, we kept having to turn the audio up and down because the sound mixing was off. Some scenes were too quiet, some scenes were too loud. Otherwise, like, technically, again, nothing super flashy or impressive, but it just has this vibe of this, world that you're entering into that's a little seedy and a little underground that I like. And I really think that that's what holds the whole movie together is this vibe, this atmosphere that's running through the whole movie, which really works.
Yeah. And so again, so I'm happy with Side Runners is again probably second to Molly's Game.
Yeah.
for the poker movies we've watched. Obviously, All In is very, very bottom, and Stu Unger Story, whatever, was also pretty bad. But this is comfortably ahead of both of those films. Right now, as of the recording of this podcast, this is May 26th, so we're only a couple days away from the very first event.
Oh, that's true.
2023 World Series of Poker. We are both officially going to Las Vegas for the main event, sort of like early July. Will be in Las Vegas. Our friend Adam, who was put in 3 main events, is pretty close to a lock to play in the main event. So we'll be on his rail supporting him, hoping for even better run than his run of 3 straight day 3 appearances. And so that'll be exciting. If you guys have any suggestions for Vegas spots, foods, sites, anything to check out, we'd love to hear those suggestions. And I will be reaching out to all of our past interviewed guests to make any recommendations for our available vacation in Vegas. So I'm very excited for this trip.
Yeah, we're going to go July 4th week. So we'll be in there for a couple days, not the entire week, but we'll both be there. And yeah, we're going to be doing some sightseeing too, but we'll also be watching the main event and keeping our eye out for all that. And then we'll do our best to talk about the WSOP as events occur. I mean, we're kicking off pretty soon with, just a few days, $1 million free roll tournament of champions. That should be pretty cool to watch. Obviously the casino employees tournament, which I always like that they have that at the start every year. So yeah, hopefully it'll be an exciting main event. Hopefully we'll have the record broken, and then hopefully, Greg Raymer will win. So,
yeah, we're gonna have the final table. It's gonna be Greg Raymer against Mike Davinsky against Adam Gross against Philip Hill. We'll fly him in and we'll make sure he plays.
And John Hesp and Ernest Wiggins.
Everyone will be there. That'd be amazing. And so, I wanted to speak to what I look for in a Poker Go live stream of a final table for the Rules of Poker, because really I look for 2 things. One is, do I know any of the players?
Mm-hmm.
And 2 is, how well do I know the game they're playing? Like Stud, I mean, it would take I don't really care for Stud too much as a game. Like watching it, I don't think it's all that fun. I tend to fast forward through those events a bit more. But as long as I see some, my top 20 to 40 players, at least one's in the field, I'll watch until they bust. Now, if it's just 5 players I've never heard of before, I just don't watch. It's just not my style.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely. I want to see people I know, and I also like a good mixture of people, somebody I know, like an old professional, but also an amateur, somebody who's on the older side of things. I always love when someone 60 plus wins a bracelet. That's cool. Maybe a celebrity maybe Steve Albini, who did records for Nirvana. Like, he's been thanked by people who've gone to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's won 2 bracelets. I'd like to see a celebrity, somebody famous own a bracelet. That'd be cool.
Cool, yeah. And guys, obviously, as always, if you want to be a part of our podcast, whether you ask us a question, you want to be interviewed by us, or just be a part of an episode of us, we can collaborate. If we run into Mike Matusow in Vegas, we will try to recreate another sort of viral, amazing moment like we had 2 years ago. That'd be pretty cool. And maybe we'll find some way to mention the mouthpiece to him, and so we could have some sort of collaboration. I can dream, right?
We could dream, yeah. I mean, we're not going to try to be too flashy. We're not going to run. There's Chris Ferguson having lunch. We're going to run up to him and ask for his photograph. We're gonna leave people alone. We're not going to bother people. But we'll definitely
try to maybe if we find him, we've been here before. We'll be like, oh hey.
We're just going to wave and say hello. That's all we're going to do. I'm in Vegas also to sightsee. I've never been to Las Vegas before, so I definitely want to see. And we'll be going with Ben's twin that he mentioned earlier, so it'll be kind of fun to see. Yeah.
So I'm very excited. We have a lot of cool developments for this podcast on the horizon, and as always, we're always brainstorming new ideas for what to cover next. And so you can look forward to more content. And especially this summer, where poker's kind of a seasonal activity on YouTube, so we'll hopefully get lots of new eyeballs on our channel to keep growing.
Absolutely, and I guess that's the end of the episode. Oh wait, I have a surprise here. What's this from England?
Oh God!
Oh yeah, talking about heads up earlier, right?
Oh my goodness, yes.
This is a surprise. I did not tell Ben in advance about this.
Oh, fantastic. Look at that. That is his Mind Sport Olympiad medal from this past MSO. What was that?
It just hit me in the face.
Oh, here we go. The same kind of bag as last time. Here we go. Is it bronze? Oh, wait, no, it's not bronze. It's silver. Da 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 da.
There it is. That is a look. I mean, that is a pretty medal. There it is on the back. It says holdem private.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at that. So now you could bring all those to Vegas and show off your poker accomplishments and just brag like, how many medals in poker do you have? And you can be like, I have 6, and you have a bracelet. What's better, 6 medals or 1 bracelet? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, the bracelet you get, a bunch of money. So
And you paid for that, so it's the opposite money.
that's true. I paid. I think it was 15 pounds for shipping and handling. So
Hey, props to you. I got some catching up to do, but
you'll get there. You'll get there. Believe me.
Hey,
we bubbled both of the heads up events. I mean, come on, man.
And you skipped both of them basically.
That's
so
true. Yeah.
you could have placed even higher this year. Anyway, guys, so this is probably our busiest podcast episode yet. I hope you enjoyed it. A little bit of everything for you guys to enjoy. We'll see you next time on this podcast. Enjoy your poker, enjoy your TV, enjoy your poker on TV.
And remember, you shall not be pushed around.
No. Bye, guys.